Hello, everyone. I hope y'all had a good weekend, or the one person who's in here right now had a good weekend. um, I'm so excited to get into this. Um, I don't know well, if anyone who's here or is going to be here, um, if you've been watching Justice in the Dark, that kind of has my brain on hold right now. I was just catching up earlier today, and it kind of just like completely wiped everything out of my brain. So I was sitting here trying to remember like what happened in our last reading. Hi Blue, hi War Dove. Yeah, so that's where my head has been. um I think that we might be able to finish the book this week on Wednesday. I don't even think like one of these streams I might have to go over a tiny bit to do that, but not even that much. I could be wrong, but I think we'll get done with it. Um, and we're on page 263 today for chapter 57, which is called Coming of Age. I'm gonna just go ahead and get started. Moshi wasn't much good in the kitchen, so he had to trouble the imperial cooks to rise from their beds and make something filling. Their encampment was close to the water, where plenty of carp flourished. The cook, not daring to slight Shihajun, carefully prepared a bowl of fish congee and steamed a basket of crab rose soup dumplings. He was about to add even more dishes when Moshi said, "That's enough. I just need something light." He returned to his tent carrying a wooden tray. Moshi lowered the thick curtain and took up the fire tongs to coax the brazier to burn more merrily. Then he paddled over to wake Gumong. When Gumong slowly opened his eyes, he saw Moshi's cool features hovering hazily before him. He began to struggle, as if he wanted to say something, but Moshi cut him off. "Okay, enough of that about dirtiness. Are you hungry?" He didn't wait for Gumong to respond before setting the tray down on the bedside table. "Eat something." His tone wasn't exactly gentle, and contained a measure of feigned annoyance. But compared to the furious man at the hot spring yesterday, he was sweet as honey. Gumong wasn't interested in making himself suffer. The instant he smelled the food, he sat up, reached out to take a bowl, and tucked in without another sound. The congee was creamy and light, the pure white slices of fish meltingly tender. He finished it all in one go. Newly energized, he reached out to grab a soup dumpling. "Oh, hi, Rena." Moshi stopped him. "Chopsticks." Gumong paused. He didn't like using chopsticks because he couldn't handle them properly. But since his lord had given the command, he had no choice but to clumsily grab the chopsticks and poke doggedly at the dumpling. Oh, the thin skin of the dumpling broke and the soup spilled out. This wasn't a problem in itself, but Gumong continued to chase that broken dumpling around the basket until he had made a complete mess of it. He never managed to grasp the entire dumpling. His chopsticks finally closed around a small piece of the skin, but the meat filling had tumbled out. I've definitely done that before. Moshi couldn't bear to watch any longer. He stiffly took the jade chopsticks from Gumong's hand and ate that tragic dumpling himself. Then he picked up an intact dumpling and brought it up to Gumong's mouth. Gumong probably thought this person was crazy, viciously mean 1 second and hand-feeding him the next. He simply couldn't wrap his mind around it. He stared in silence. "Open your mouth," Moshi said, impatient. Gumong truly was famished, so after a second of hesitation, he opened his mouth and bit into the dumpling Moshi had picked up for him. It burst with a pop, spraying soup everywhere. Moshi couldn't dodge in time and received a perfectly aimed faceful of soup. Gumong hadn't fared much better. His lips were painfully scalded, and he spat out the half-bitten dumpling with a hiss. Just as he thought, Moshi hated him and wanted him to suffer. Moshi grabbed Gumong's chin and tilted his face up, interrupting Gumong's thoughts. For a moment, he thought Moshi was angry and wanted to slap him again. His blue eyes flickered uneasily. But the pain he expected never arrived. He looked down, his lashes fluttering as he studied Moshi's expression. Moshi was staring at his mouth, his face inscrutable. After some time, Gumong heard him murmur through gritted teeth, "Why are you always..." "Always what?" Moshi didn't finish his sentence, but pain stabbed through Gumong's head as blurry scenes flashed through his mind. At some other point in time, this had happened before. He had eaten something too hastily and burned his tongue. And then it seemed like someone had also grabbed his chin like this, tilting his face up to peer at him while grumbling about him not being more careful. "Just nibble a small hole in it first, then eat it. No one's going to take it from you. Let me see how bad it is." Then, for some inexplicable reason, that person had suddenly bent down and kissed him on the mouth, cool lips wrapping around his tender and scalded tongue. This memory made Gumong bewildered, made his heart throb. He licked his lips without realizing. The movement seemed to set a fire in Moshi's chest. Even as it blazed bright inside him, his eyes went dark. After a beat of silence, Moshi slowly released him, turning his fair, handsome face aside. After Gumong finished eating, he felt Moshi's eyes on him once more. It was time for him to take his medicine. Gumong knew he couldn't avoid it, so he gulped down the medicine to get it over with as fast as possible. He never anticipated that Moshi would bring him a second jar. His eyes widened. "It's for your fever," Moshi said, his tone indifferent. "I had the healers here prepare it. Drink." Helpless, Gumong chugged this jar of medicine as well with an unpleasant expression. Moshi cleared away the dishes and said, "Go to sleep." Rena, thank God I just ate, because this would have been too much otherwise. Yeah, exactly. Oh, Blue, you forgot to eat before. Yeah, you gotta eat. You gotta eat before the meat bun streams. "This is your bed," Gumong replied carefully. "Yesterday, you said I don't want to talk about what happened yesterday," Moshi cut him off. "Nor am I helping you because I feel guilty about it. Sure. If you got sick, I would be inconvenienced. I don't wish to be inconvenienced." Gumong fell silent. "Do you understand?" A nod. "Then go to sleep." Moshi brought the tableware back to the Imperial cooks. By the time he returned to the tent, Gumong had indeed obediently gone to sleep. But likely because yesterday's incident in the hot spring had badly frightened him, he didn't dare be too presumptuous, and had curled up as small as he could in one corner of the bed. Moshi stared at him for a moment, expressionless. He picked up a felt blanket and covered Gumong with it. Perhaps it was because he was sleeping in Moshi's bed, surrounded by his scent. Gumong furrowed his brow and slept fitfully, images flashing now and again through his head. These images were blurry and disconnected at the beginning, but by the end, like a meandering stream pouring into a rushing river, a vivid memory returned to his feverish head. He hazily recalled the day Moshi had come of age. Gumong had gathered up a pocketful of jangling cowrie shells and gone to a nearby market for a jar of pear blossom white wine and 2 or 3 good dishes. The cold wind rustled past him as he slipped into Moshi's tent, arms full of food and wine. Shidi, Shidi. Moshi had been reading. When he looked up and caught sight of Gumong, he was visibly surprised. "What are you doing here so late?" With a smile, Gumong put everything down and shook out his aching limbs. "I'm here to keep you company. Aren't you going to be 20 in a few Shuchen?" Moshi looked astonished. "I forgot." Gumong laughed. "I just knew it. You think of nothing but spell techniques. Of course you've even forgotten about something like this." He pulled over a small table and started arranging everything on it as he cheerfully continued. "Don't worry. You may have forgotten, but your Shiga hasn't." Moshi rolled up his scroll and rose to help him, trying to hide his blush. "Thank you very much," he murmured. "What are you thanking me for? You only come of age once in your life. How sad would it be if you spent it out here by yourself? Come here, let Shiga keep you company." He grinned mischievously. "I'll keep you company as you change from a little brat into a grown man." He winked, then summoned up a solemn expression, through youth and into adulthood. What could Moshi say to something like that? Such smarmy behavior should have infuriated him. At the time, however, Moshi had been harboring long-standing feelings for Gumong. He had tried to confess them on several occasions, but each time something had gotten in the way. So he'd kept his feelings suppressed in his heart. Now, on the night of his coming of age, the object of his affections had not only remembered the date, but had even snuck into Moshi's tent to be with him. Forget Gumong calling him a little brat. He could have said much worse, and Moshi wouldn't have cared. Everyone calm down. Yeah. I'm like, is this going to be the confession scene? Gumong lifted... Wait, am I in the right place? Did I turn... Yes, okay. Gumong lifted the lids of the food boxes to reveal several humble and common dishes. After he finished setting the table, he warmed a pot of good wine on the stove. The brothers chatted and ate, and the night grew dark before they knew it. Gumong back then had only seen Moshi as a little shudi he was very close with, and was completely unguarded around him. That night, Gumong had a bit too much to drink, and the wine had gone to his head, so he was teasing Moshi mercilessly. In contrast, Moshi remained relatively sober and restrained. Although he had also downed 2 cups of wine, he was hardly inebriated. As he watched his Shuxiang get more and more unruly, he had the feeling it would be improper to let this continue. After a moment of consideration, he told Gumong he would walk him back to his own tent. But Gumong was having fun. How could he be willing to leave? Chuckling, he slung an arm around Moshi's shoulders and affectionately scooched closer. "No way. Why would Guga go home so early?" "You've had too much," Moshi said, exasperated, as he disentangled himself from Gumong and tried to pull him up from the table. Gumong very helpfully stood up, but he had no intention of leaving whatsoever. He paced around the table, then threw himself into Moshi's arms, laughing. "Shidi, we're 2 good bros, 2 good bros, ah ha ha ha." As he giggled, he buried his burning face in the crook of Moshi's neck. "The first time I saw you at the academy, you weren't even as tall as I am. You looked so small and serious." He chuckled, oblivious to the flush making its way up Moshi's neck. "In a blink of an eye, you've become a man even stronger and taller than your Shiga." He stumbled to his feet once more and reached out to cup Moshi's face. Beaming, he continued, "It's just your face that's still the same. When you're not glaring, you look so delicate and pretty." So sick of this pearl blossom wine turning the immortal masters gay. Unfortunately, he was too drunk to notice how complicated Moshi's expression had become. The brightest love, the greediest lust, and the deepest tenderness all surfaced one after another, only to be forced down again by the coldest self-control. Separated by mere inches, Moshi tore his gaze away from Gumong's face. Shixiong should go to sleep, he said firmly. I'll help you back. Sleep. Laughing, Gumong tried very hard to straighten up, but before Moshi could lead him anywhere, he folded at the waist like a crab that had spent the winter drunk. Without warning, he collapsed against Moshi again, his limbs all askew. Both of them stumbled. The force of Gumong's weight upon him sent Moshi tumbling backward onto the army bed, Gumong heavy on his chest. I don't feel like leaving, Gumong mumbled. My tent is so far away. Moshi was at a loss. I'll sleep right here. Gumong was used to acting quite casual with Liu Jianxing and his other buddies. But because his little shidi Moshi was beautiful, highborn, and the picture of icy aloofness, Gumong cherished him but took care to keep himself in check. He always worried that he might accidentally upset this noble young master 3 years his junior. If Gumong were sober, he definitely wouldn't be so forward. Even if he was exhausted and wanted to stay over, he'd still ask with a smile, is it okay if Shixiong sleeps here for the night? But the wine had muddled his head. He no longer had so many reservations, and even his cautious habit of asking for permission had faded. Like some Jianghu big shot, he tossed out a demand without an ounce of hesitation and let out an enormous yawn. Leaving Moshi to his vibrant mess of emotions, Gumong wasted no more time. He closed his eyes and went to sleep. Moshi's face was going green. He gritted his teeth as he looked down at the head resting on his chest. Get up. How could he let Gumong sleep here? He felt such unspeakable desire toward him, such that it tormented his heart day in and day out. How could he possibly let Gumong so unwittingly sleep by his side? But it seemed like Gumong was really about to spend the night like this. The frustration in Moshi's chest blazed to life. He decided he would get up and haul Gumong to his feet, even if he had to carry Gumong piggyback to his tent. That was preferable to Gumong sleeping here with him. But Moshi had barely twitched before Gumong lifted his head again, seemingly alert. No, I just remembered, he piped up. I can't sleep yet. With that, Gumong rolled over, getting off Moshi. He reached into the collar of his robe as he mumbled, I nearly forgot. I even bought you a coming-of-age present. Hey, where'd it go? Laying there in Moshi's bed, Gumong fished around in his robes for a long time. At last, he produced a crumpled little book from within his lapels. He gazed triumphantly at the pamphlet in his hand, then pulled Moshi close. He looked every bit the part of a scoundrel elder brother corrupting the youth. Heh, it's your 20th birthday. That means you've come of age. Your Gumong Guga knows you like to read. I couldn't afford to get you anything expensive, but I dredged this up from the Jiuzi bookstall. It's cheap, but it's definitely something else. I feel like I know what this is going to be. He boasted of his purchase like a salesman shamelessly hawking his wares. Then he shoved the book into Moshi's hands, his enthusiasm obvious. Look at it. Moshi didn't pick up Gumong's implication, nor could he make heads or tails of Gumong's Weasley expression. He honestly thought Gumong had brought him an interesting book, so he took the pamphlet and opened it. At first glance, he didn't understand. At second glance, he saw that it was full of mysterious drawings, but was still unsure. Gumong was lying next to him, He inched his warm body closer as he laughed. So, isn't it great? Some minutes passed, yet he still hadn't heard Moshi make a sound. Rather, that youth's beautiful face was filled with some confusion. Gumong was flabbergasted. No way, you don't like it? It's so thrilling. Goga spent a long time picking it out. He followed Moshi's gaze, paused for a moment, and then said, Shidi. Gumong sighed. He looped one arm over Moshi's shoulders. You're holding it upside down. He plucked the book from Moshi's fine-boned hands and flipped it over. Clearing his throat, he chuckled, voice smooth and low. Come here, be good. Goga will teach you how to read it right side up. Voila, look, Gumong proclaimed. With a single glance, Moshi's fair and gallant features flushed beet red. This was a fucking porn booklet. Okay, that's the end of the chapter. I was thinking I was thinking of Wang Xian too, like immediately. And also I have to wonder how would you not be able to tell what it was just because the pictures were upside down? But okay. Moshi is very innocent. Okay, we're at chapter 58, which is called Teach Me, Shishang. As though he touched something disgusting, Moshi's dark eyes widened like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. He tried to slam the book shut in shame and anger, but Gumong, cackling himself silly, wrapped his arms mischievously around him. Not only did he refuse to let Moshi close the booklet, he snatched it from him and held it open, forcing Moshi to look at those wrinkled pages. Moshi didn't want to get into a real fight with Gumong, so the two tumbled around on the bed for a long time, one drunkenly snickering while the other quietly berated him. In the midst of the chaos, the book landed wide open on Moshi's face with an audible slap. All his hair stood on end at the obscene images pressed right into his face. Moshi sprang up from the bed as if he'd been showered in sewage and pushed Gumong aside, his usually elegant and reserved face bright red. He didn't want to look at Gumong, and he wanted to touch that booklet even less. Chest heaving, Moshi turned away. He swallowed and fixed his collar. Don't joke like that with me. This was a warning. Unfortunately, Gumong was already too far gone to heed it. His mind was so addled, he thought his little Shidi was only pouting in embarrassment. It was his own fault for not reading the man right. Underneath it all, Moshi was a savage and unbridled carnivore. But his deceptively cool, proper facade had tricked Gumong into thinking he was an ethereal, red-crowned crane who would remain untouchably aloof no matter how he was provoked. In hindsight, the mess Moshi fucked him into was of his own making. Under the influence of the wine, the oblivious Gumong found Moshi's icy awkwardness indescribably funny, and he couldn't bear to let him off the hook. He retrieved the booklet that Moshi had cruelly tossed aside and offered him a tipsy smile. You're sure you don't want it? Moshi said nothing. If you don't want it, I'll read it myself. With that, he lay back on Moshi's bed and began to flip through it, oohing and awing with a wide grin. Moshi's ears were blood red. He closed his eyes and tried to endure this indignity in silence, but his traitorous heart seemed to beat as loud as a drum in that quiet tent. After a short moment, he rose and said in muted tones, I'll go clean up. Gumong's smiling face peeped out from behind his book, eyes gleaming with intoxication. You're running away? Moshi ignored him. He focused on tidying up and went outside to wash the bowls and chopsticks. Gumong had no idea how long his shidi spent out in the wind trying to calm himself down. He only thought that Moshi was awfully cute and funny. How did such a naive alpine flower sprout from the ranks of those noble scions? 20 years old and still blushing red to the tips of his ears after merely touching a book of erotica. So silly. Gumong thought that this wouldn't do at all. Moshi was already all grown up. In a few years, he might even be married. Yet, at his age, he couldn't handle something as banal as sex. Such excessive shyness was a disease. It needed to be thoroughly cured. Otherwise, what would he do as a newlywed? Would he push the poor bride away and coldly intone, "My apologies, I must abstain from such obscenities"? Gumong was really too drunk. His mind wandered without logic or restraint. The more he thought, the funnier it all became. He grew convinced that he was truly the perfect Shixiong, fussing over his shidi like a mother hen. He carelessly flipped through the booklet as he pondered. The images before his eyes were all indescribably lewd and over the top. As he turned the pages, he became quite engrossed in it. He thought nothing of the spark he'd set off in Moshi, or whatever profound reflections on life the youth was having in the cold wind outside. He was blissfully relaxed, his habitually tense muscles loosened by the pearl blossom white wine. He was enjoying this coming-of-age present that Moshi had so disliked. The more he read, the more he suspected that this rascal Moshi had no taste. If Lu Jianxing were here, he would already be tucked right next to him, appreciating this excellent work. The two of them would chatter away about which position was the best, and which girl was the prettiest, leers on both of their faces. At least, that's what normal men did. Was there something wrong with Moshi? Gumong's imagination ran wild. His thoughts trailed off as the drawings lit a blaze in his heart. Each of those meticulously detailed paintings was more arousing than the last. As he perused them, he felt his mouth go dry. His inebriated body was too easily set alight by the flame of desire, to the point that even his blood burned hot. In truth, he hadn't done anything sexual in a long time. When he and his brothers went out to brothels, he might get handsy with the ladies and enjoy their giggling conversation, but he'd never managed I cannot speak today. Sorry. He'd never managed to take that final step. Even Gumong himself couldn't quite explain why. Perhaps it was because he thought sex without love wouldn't be as satisfying. Perhaps it was because he had grown up a lost orphan and had always, from the bottom of his heart, longed for a steady companionship that would last a lifetime. Or perhaps none of those excuses were true. Perhaps they were all a front. He just thought that the girls he'd held all felt too delicate, like fragile porcelain. He certainly admired their beauty, but he'd never felt much desire. For instance, in the painting before him, the women were fair and alluring, but he preferred to look at the men having sex with them, at those strapping, powerful, unshakable physiques. At this thought, Gumong felt that there was probably something wrong with him. He kept flipping through the book. Although he'd skimmed it previously, he hadn't looked closely at every picture. Now, one page in particular stopped him in his tracks. Blood roared through Gumong's ears, making his muddled head ring. Yet he hadn't even registered why his blood had surged like that. It was an instinctive reaction to what was on the page. Only after the shock had passed did he realize that this painting wasn't quite like the others. The artist had probably wanted to paint something provocative and felt that heterosexual pairings alone weren't novel enough, so they'd gotten creative and produced a very daring scene. Naturally, these erotic pictures all featured women, and the woman in this painting was lying on her back with her hair in disarray and her slender neck arched, legs spread for the man plundering her fair and trembling body. But that wasn't the point. The part that made Gumong's heart pound and set his body aflame was that there was yet another man behind the first, his arms wrapped around him from the back, and he was. With a single glance at that picture, Gumong's face, normally thick as a city wall, flushed red in an instant. He felt dizzy, like the answer to a question that had puzzled him for a long time had burst out of the water to stir up a maelstrom in his heart. All the blood in his body rushed south. He was instantly so hard it hurt. Gumong was so dazed and drunk that he stared blankly at this picture for many minutes and didn't even notice when Moshi returned. Moshi, having contemplated the meaning of life at length outside, walked over to the bedside. Only then did Gumong dimly react and turn his head in his stupor. He saw a handsome visage left pale as porcelain by the freezing wind outside. Moshi's lashes were very long, his slightly pursed lips thin yet sensual. He stared down at Gumong, eyes deep and dark. They seemed to be filled with some indescribable emotion. Gumong had never noticed a look like this in Moshi's eyes before. He couldn't identify it. All he knew was that it made his heart blaze with yearning. Moshi appeared to have figured out what he wanted to say to Gumong while he was outside. However, he'd barely gotten a word out before Gumong yanked him down. He didn't hear at all what Moshi had said, nor could he have understood it if he had. He just had a vague conviction that good things should be enjoyed with his good brothers. He rashly redoubled his efforts. Drunkenly ignoring Moshi's efforts, he persisted in trying to show him the porn booklet. You have something to tell me, and I have something to show you. First, look at these with me, and then I'll listen to what you have to say. Fair trade. Moshi must have been truly exasperated by his pestering, to the point that his temper had been snuffed out. Or perhaps it was because he'd made up his mind that tonight he would confess the feelings that had been building in his heart for a long time. Whatever it was, Moshi finally capitulated. He lay down next to Gumong and read the damn book with him. Even noble-born foot soldiers didn't get wide camp beds. It inevitably felt a little cramped with two men squeezed together. Moshi lay on his side beside Gumong and looked at the erotic booklet with him. Or more accurately, was extorted into looking at the erotic booklet with him. Gumong turned his head to peek at Moshi from time to time. You've closed your eyes again, he admonished. Open them up. Moshi said nothing. It doesn't count if your eyes are closed. Your Ge is teaching you how to hook up with girls. You'd better pay attention. Silence. Moshi had seen people get wildly drunk, but he'd never before seen a wild drunk force his brothers to read porn with him. Gumong had no plans to show him the most exciting picture right away, instead flipping through the pages one by one. Every once in a while, he turned his head to check that Moshi hadn't looked away. The tent was very quiet. Gumong knew that page was coming ever closer. He didn't know if it was because of his penchant for teasing this icy beauty, or for some other reason, but his heart was racing. Moshi's breathing also roughened, likely in response to Gumong's own agitated state. With one exhale, his searing breath brushed across Gumong's temple, and his firm chest pressed against his back, as if shoring up for a storm that neither of them could control. So warm, so hot. They slowly made their way through the book. Gumong knew exactly how many pages were left before that picture of two men entwined. At first, he had been in a rush to reach that page and share the enjoyment of it with Moshi, but the atmosphere between the two of them gradually grew more strange. There seemed to be an invisible stream of heat passing between them where their bodies nestled together. All of a sudden, that daring jokester had second thoughts. Why don't we stop here? Weren't you trying to show me something special? They spoke at almost the same time. Gumong turned his face, the tip of his nose almost brushing Moshi's cheek. It was like the air in the tent had thickened, becoming too hot to flow and too dense to dissipate. Gumong sensed danger, like he'd fallen into a trap of his own making, like he'd burned himself playing with fire. He parted his lips in an attempt to speak, but he couldn't make a sound. Moshi narrowed his eyes, watching him from mere inches away. You were, weren't you? How special could it be? Ahaha. The next page was that page. Gumong swallowed, half wanting to slam the book shut, then and there. But Moshi, who had previously loathed the little booklet like nothing else, had scented a subtle change in the air. He snatched the book away with his elegant, powerful hand, and his long fingers reached out to turn the page. Gumong closed his eyes with a sense of impending doom. It was silent. Neither of them moved. Neither made a sound. After a few moments, Gumong couldn't bear the suspense. He cracked his eyelids to sneak a quick peek. He saw Moshi wearing an inscrutable, complicated expression as he examined the painting of one man fucking another man. His eyes flickered. The aura emanating from Moshi was too strange. Even drunk, Gumong still shivered at the sight of him. He summoned up a forced smile and made to get up. Shidi, congratulations on coming of age. It's gotten late. Guga's going to go back now. He hadn't finished the sentence when Moshi pinned him back down. As before, Gumong was lying on his side, Moshi against his back. However, Moshi had intentionally left some distance between them earlier. His chest had been pressed to Gumong's back, but they hadn't been touching anywhere else. Right now, Moshi had basically pulled Gumong flush against his body. Gumong immediately felt something very large and hard push against him and even thrust forward. Gumong let out a muffled gasp. The alcohol, the new sensation, the terrifying taboo, and his accumulated lust all combined to make him incredibly sensitive. A humid, fiery voice rumbled against his ear, the rough, deep desire audible within, making his wine-softened body tremble all over. Somehow, he didn't know that voice at all. Moshi panted raggedly into his ear. Was this what Shiga wanted me to see so badly? No, Gumong only managed a handful of words before his earlobe was captured by a warm mouth, soon followed by a rough tongue licking around and into his ear. Okay, don't do that. Gumong was instantly sapped of his strength, the unfamiliar sensations drawing a moan from his lips. This cry seemed to give the newly adult young man behind him a tremendous dose of courage. Moshi drew him into a snug embrace, his strong hands wrapping around Gumong's waist as he pulled him close. He was holding himself back, but he'd been doing so for so long that, given this small outlet, his desire rushed forth messily. He sucked Gumong's earlobe with increasing force and passion. You know, Meatbun is really into ears. Moshi, that's not what I meant. But Moshi wouldn't hear a thing he said anymore. He held Gumong from behind with one hand as he ran his other one over his entire body. When he felt Gumong's own burgeoning reaction, his fervency only increased. He grabbed Gumong by the chin and stared into his eyes under the candlelight. He suddenly leaned down and kissed him. Like a parched man, he captured Gumong's lips almost violently, forcibly licking into his mouth. This kiss was frankly too intense. The sound of it was soft and sticky, and it entwined with the sounds of Gumong panting and struggling. The noises Gumong made seemed to hit Moshi like an aphrodisiac. He took hold of Gumong, who was attempting to turn around, and clutched him close, caging him tightly in his arms. Moshi tilted Gumong's face toward his own and kissed him passionately while pushing up against Gumong's ass through their clothes. Moshi kissed Gumong's lips until they were red and glossy. As they separated, he panted for breath, his eyes indescribably dark. His voice was so rough, there could have been smoke when he spoke. Shixiong said he would accompany me tonight as I changed from a little brat to a grown man. Go ahead, then. Gumong wanted to throttle his loudmouth self of a few hours ago. This is not what I fucking meant, he wailed. Too late. Moshi pulled himself up, then turned Gumong over and shoved him beneath his own body. His lapels were loose and open, revealing a chest that was as fine as jade but tremendously sturdy. I gave you your chance to leave. It was you who refused. Gumong, for once, couldn't muster a response. Moshi tossed the booklet aside, gripped Gumong's chin, and lifted his face. Those delicate and elegant eyes watched him in a daze. Moshi, you're being ridiculous. Moshi's throat bobbed as he reached out to untie Gumong's sash. He said softly. Ridiculous is what Shixiong knows best. His eyes were terrifyingly dark as they raked over the sight of Gumong beneath him, skin flushed and burning with desire. Finally, he bent down and murmured, Teach me, Shixiong. Well, that was the end of that chapter. And I didn't know what things Gumong was was gonna remember first, but apparently that's one of them. Let me see. Okay, I'm going to read the next chapter and then we're going to take a break. So this is chapter 59, which is called Memory Begins to Wake. Gumong's eyes flew open, blue irises shining wet in the darkness. The tent was quiet. His chest was heaving violently, and his back was soaked with sweat. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding loudly in the silent night. He swallowed. What had he just dreamed? The last thing he saw was Moshi pushing him down and capturing his lips with his own. That searing heat as contrary to his customary coolness as night from day. Gumong could almost feel that overpowering emotion rushing forth from the dream to drown him in its wake. But what was that feeling? He didn't understand. He only felt that it was shockingly warm and terrifyingly strong. So much so that it could pass from his dreams and into his waking mind, making his heart pound and his blood surge. It was too sweet and too dangerous. Gumong unwittingly reached up to touch his mouth. He turned over. Moshi was sitting on a chair by the bed, his head tilted to the side, fast asleep. His face was markedly different from the one Gumong had glimpsed in his dream. The man before him no longer looked as young, or as impulsive, or even as sincere. Time had not taken the elegant beauty of his features, but it had stripped away his carefree youth and naive honesty. As Gumong gazed at him... Oh, there's art. As Gumong gazed at him, he recalled the words Moshi had said to him at their first meeting. We used to know each other. Gumong hadn't taken him seriously then, but now confusion swelled in his heart. It seemed that they used to be very close. They laughed with their arms slung around each other's shoulders and rolled about in the same bed. That Moshi in his dream had been just like Fando. He didn't think Gumong dirty at all. Was any of that real? At the very end, their lips had touched so intimately. He didn't know what it meant, but at the thought of that sensation, his heart felt so warm, though the heat was not without pain. He was genuinely curious about this feeling. After their lips met, what would happen next? He longed to know, but the dream had ended, and he couldn't remember more. Gumong blinked his blue eyes. He genuinely didn't know what to make of these subtle nuances. In the end, he leaned over the edge of the bed. He hesitated for a moment, but eventually, he reached out with great curiosity to touch a fingertip to Moshi's pale lips. How strange. Why were they cool to the touch? They had been warm in the dream. Maybe the dream hadn't been real. Before he could finish the thought, he saw that Moshi had woken at his touch, his lashes fluttering minutely as his eyes drifted open in the candlelight. But he was not fully awake. His eyes were still unfocused. As he turned his hazy gaze on Gumong, he saw that Gumong was touching his mouth, so he grew convinced he was still dreaming. He sighed almost sorrowfully and took hold of Gumong's hand. Pulling it to his lips, he kissed it softly. Shuxiong, I dreamed of you again. Only in dreams would you keep from angering me. Okay, here's the art. So that's... yeah. That's happening. Only in dreams would you be like this, behaving and staying by my side. Those soft, cool lips brushed against the back of Gumong's hand. Moshi bowed his head, as if choked up. Gumong stared at him, dazed. Never, since they had first met, had this man been so vulnerable and gentle. Gumong didn't understand why the sight of him like this would fill his heart with grief. Why did it hurt so much? Just yesterday, this person had struck him, chased him off, and called him dirty. But he felt that something wasn't right, that they didn't actually feel this way. The two of them shouldn't be like this. Gumong hesitated. I dreamed of you, he whispered. Moshi blinked in surprise, then raised his head. The candlelight and the shadow had shrouded them in a haze that was fast dissipating. Moshi's startled eyes slowly focused and sharpened. Gumong watched the confusion and tenderness in his eyes retreat, exposing an expanse of shock and pain. Moshi abruptly let go of Gumong's hand. He was awake. He jumped to his feet and stared at Gumong for a spell. His face turned many colors, but he didn't immediately speak. Hand pressed to his forehead, he closed his eyes for a long while before gritting out, Don't take that seriously. I wasn't fully awake. I dreamed of you, Gumong interrupted. Moshi had thought he was talking about some random dream and hadn't paid much attention. But seeing him bring it up a second time, he paused. What did you dream about? Gumong knelt on the bed, looking up at the much taller man in front of him. His gaze swept nakedly across Moshi's lips before it finally returned to his dark eyes. I dreamed that you weren't as sad as you are now. You were warm. You were smiling. Moshi said nothing. You called me Shuga. Moshi's pupils shrank. With trembling fingertips, he grabbed the back of Gumong's head, forcing him to look straight ahead, to look only at him, to offer up all his expressions to his eyes alone. His voice was shaking and terribly hoarse. "What did you say?" "You were young. So was I. We were together in a tent." After a moment's thought, Gumong said softly, "You came of age. I kept you company." Moshi's face was terrifyingly pale. Gumong softly repeated the words he'd remembered, through youth and into adulthood. Moshi suddenly felt as if he'd been shot through by lightning. A shudder coursed through his whole body. All his blood rushed to his head, the furious tide dimming his vision and turning his limbs ice cold. His eyes were horribly bright, his expression dark and frightening. He seemed on the verge of being torn into disparate fragments by the relentless rapids. Was Gumong starting to remember? Was this the first recollection he'd regained? "I'll stay with you." Moshi took a step back. He should have felt astonishment or even relief, but he never thought he'd hear those words of endearment from the past so unexpectedly. He thought he'd never hear anything like that again. He thought he'd never hear anything. Okay, I don't know if they repeated that or on accident or if they repeated it for emphasis. He thought he'd never hear anything like that again. He thought he'd rely on the few pitiful memories he possessed to keep the anguish at bay all his life. How could Gumong just say that? Okay, yeah, I think it was intentional, because afterwards I realized there's like an ellipsis and then it's like italicized, but for a second it just like threw me off. How could Gumong just say that? Those bygone words felt like a hammer smashing into his chest. He doubled over almost unconsciously. A sentence so simple had battered this invincible man until he could hardly stand. He sank heavily back into the chair and buried his face in his hands, unable to say a word. He had slapped Gumong before, but Gumong saying those words was more than enough to break his heart. Gumong watched him. He had originally wanted to ask, was that only a dream? Or did I finally remember some of the past? But no matter how ignorant Gumong might have been, he still understood when he saw Moshi's reaction. It was real. The two of them had really shared moments like that when they had been young and fearless, moments which were now left behind in their past. That night, Moshi fled stumbling from the tent. Over the next 2 days, he seemed to avoid Gumong deliberately. Before, Moshi would look at him with cool disdain. Now it seemed like he was incapable of facing him calmly. Gumong tried, haltingly, to ask him about what he'd remembered, but Moshi refused to be alone with him. The instant he saw him, he walked away. Moshi genuinely didn't know how to face Gumong. He wasn't sure exactly how much Gumong had remembered. Was it just the first half of that night, or all of the absurd things that followed? He wanted to ask, but he didn't dare. Besides, what was the point in asking? Their relationship was already shattered, with no possibility of repair. What was the point in gathering those scraps of tenderness and compounding his own heartbeat, his own heartbreak? The ribbon of heroes still lay across his brow. How could he forget the debt of blood that Gumong owed Changhua? And so they journeyed on like this, in silence. On the third day, they finally arrived at the soul-calling abyss. It was a fathomless ravine, neither its beginning nor its end visible to the eye. Rushing waters flowed within its depths, surging powerfully from east to west. The troops arrived at daybreak, as the dawning sun pierced the dark night and ascended solemnly from the horizon. Golden light, brilliant but not blinding, spilled across the continent of the 9 provinces. The emperor sat astride a fine snow-white steed with golden wings. With his stirrups flashing gold and his long robes a piercing white, he rode at the head of the imperial army. Behind him, the entire noble entourage dismounted in succession. As the first rays of dawn illuminated the gold trim of their robes, these noble scions made for a lofty and magnificent sight. The master of ceremonies cried, "Offer the sacrificial lotuses." An attendant from each noble family had received an ever-bright flower lantern lit with whale oil, which they now passed into their lord's hands. These lanterns represented the martyred heroes of each family. The lords cupped their lanterns in their hands and followed the emperor to the edge of the soul-calling abyss. Muranglian, Yue Juntian, Mo Shi. These heads of Changhua's noble clans stepped forward, one after another, clad in robes woven with sapphire blue bats, snowy white hatchets, and pitch-black soaring snakes. Each clan's ceremonial regalia was opulent and stunning. Just one of those insignia-patterned damask robes was awe-inspiring in isolation. But now all of these supremely powerful noble families were lined up in a row, their long trains and wide sleeves fluttering in the wind. The golden trim at their hems gleamed, lavish and beautiful. It was nothing if not majestic. Truly, this stream has knocked me out so far because I cannot read anything. "Kneel," shouted the master of ceremonies. The entourage fell to its knees like a great wave, becoming a tide of multicolored fabric limned in gold. "Lower the lanterns." Moshi and the others released the flower lanterns into the abyss. These lanterns were enchanted with the spell of weightlessness, so the twinkling lights fell softly down to drift upon the abyssal waters. The sun broke through the sky, setting the heavens and the earth alight. The family heads bent down on one knee, and the exercising soul song resounded across the firmament. Our sons went forth, with swords held brave, their blood and bones in distant grave. Last year the self was yet intact. Last night this body spoke and laughed. Your loyalty I safely keep. Your valiant deeds I freely speak. For when these heroes' souls come home, throughout the land shall peace be known. The notes of this song echoed for an age as uncountable motes of glimmering light flowed up from the depths of the soul-calling abyss. It was said that they were the fragments of consciousness the deceased heroes had left in the world. Responding to the offerings of their kin, they rose into endless golden light. Guma watched this scene and heard the sustained notes of the eulogy. He watched those known and named flower lanterns drift down. The Yue clan souls, the Mo clan souls, the Murong clan souls. All these dead had people to remember them. They were remembered over and over again in the sounds of the soul-calling song, carved into their families' hearts. But there seemed to be trapped in his heart some other humble names. Though he could no longer recall them, they seemed, at this moment, to pummel him like the surf. Those names were largely inelegant and simple. Some were no more than a surname paired with a number. They bespoke a sense of lowliness. There were too many of them echoing sorrowfully in his head, as if an army of fallen, nameless soldiers were calling to him from beneath the abyss, rebuking him, blaming him. General Gu, General Gu, you said if we called you General Gu, you would lead us out of hell. You said you'd bring us home. You'd give us a name. You lied. Not even you can remember our names. Not even you remember who we were. Our broken limbs have rotted. Our spilled blood has dried. We left nothing behind. Is there a soul lantern for unnamed heroes? One to guide us back to the homeland we once protected, to see our old friends, to see the mountains and rivers of our nation? General Gu, General Gu, my name is. My name is. His ears were buzzing, the rims of his eyes red. Gumong gasped for air but couldn't breathe. In his daze, he saw countless corpses crawl out of the abyss, their blurred faces surging toward him. Gumong? The last thing he heard was a quiet note of alarm from the captain beside him. He wanted to respond, but something was caught in his throat. He was choking on those forgotten names that had come to demand his life. In his confusion, he clearly heard a rousing bellow of fury. It was his own voice, splitting the sky from some battle in the past. Come on. If you're not dead yet, get up. You called me General Gu. If you're dead, I'll raise a gravestone for you. If you live, I'll take you home. Get up. That blood-soaked voice stabbed into his heart. He felt shame. He felt agony. He felt the sorrow and dissatisfaction of breaking a promise. Gumong clapped a hand to his brow, his ears ringing. At last, pain splitting his head, he crumpled and collapsed into the dirt. Oh, that's the end of the chapter. Ugh, ugh, indeed. I miss the lighthearted chapters already. Yeah, Rena. Me too. um, that was a lot of stuff to happen in a short time, and now we are here at our break. I'm gonna take like, you remember when we were dropping corn? Yeah. Um, right, Blue. Going from laughing to this immediately. So, I'm going to take like a 5 to 10 minute break. When we come back, we're going to be on chapter 60, page 293. And this one is called Lost Souls. Great title. Very promising title for the chapter. I finally figured out the whole, like, waiting screen, I think. So hopefully this works. But anyway, I will be back in, like, 10 minutes. You can't hear me. I'm sorry. Yep, I know. Sorry about that. I was just saying, I'm sorry you could hear my phone notification. I thought it was just supposed to be showing the screen and not, like, playing the sounds that were coming from my computer, but I guess I'm just gonna have to, like, put it in Do Not Disturb if I do that. Yep, we are back. Well, we are on chapter 60 for Lost Souls. Gumong remained unconscious for almost a week. During this time, he dimly sensed that he was lying in a carriage. Sunlight streamed through the pale curtains, and Moshi sat wearily by his side. Now and again he'd recall some fragmented and disorganized scenes, some involving Moshi, some full of the indistinct faces of soldiers. They were laughing and joking, wine splashing as their cups clinked. At times, the sound of someone calling him General Gu would flash through his mind, or Moshi's soft murmur of Shushong. In his dreams, that sacrificial, soul-calling song hung in the air like willow fuzz, never dissipating. Our sons went forth with swords held brave, their blood and bones in distant grave. Last year the self was yet intact. Last night this body spoke and laughed. It seemed as if those men whose bones had long been lost had surrounded him just yesterday, watching him hold forth on worldly ideals, listening to him expound passionately on how even slaves could have ambition, could have a future. Those admiring, enthusiastic, faithful faces. Why couldn't he remember them? Those names he had carved into his heart by reading the slave registry. Those names that no one would spare a second glance amid the sea of people. Why couldn't he remember them? He had forgotten everything, but the shame remained, tormenting him beyond endurance. Your loyalty I safely keep, your valiant deeds I freely speak. He didn't dare keep listening, for when these heroes' souls come home... But his people couldn't return. His brothers couldn't return. They were nameless, lonely souls and wild ghosts, bleeding and decapitated. They couldn't find their way home. His heart hurt fiercely. He couldn't breathe. The names of his fellow soldiers that he once strove to memorize crowded into his chest. They were about to tear his heart apart, about to drive him insane. As if he were about to drown beneath that pile of dead souls, he cowered, sobbing. Don't hate me. I tried. I really did try. Please forgive me. Please don't enlist in your next life. I hope you'll be born into nobility and enjoy a lifetime of gambling and games. I'm begging you, in the next life, please don't serve under a general like me. I'm no use. I'm too naive. I'm too stupid. I was really too stupid. I was the one who caused you all to die in vain. I was the one who wasn't strong enough and doomed every last one of you. Please. Please. Gumong sobbed before this horde of shadows in his dream. He suddenly caught sight of someone's silhouette in the crowd. Someone tall and brash, boldly arrogant and forever brilliant. This man turned back to smile at him. Gumong's heart burned, and a forgotten name emerged from somewhere deep within. He knelt in the dreamscape, a cry tearing itself from his throat. Jianxing! Liu Jianxing grinned, but he didn't say a word. He only blinked before turning away to vanish among the coursing tide of souls. Gumong wanted to chase after him, wanted to grab him and hold him back, wanted to say many things to him. But like every other dead soul, Liu Jianxing, too, disappeared in the end. A vast darkness descended like a torrential rain. In this unending night, Chonghua's soul-calling song was a soft, lilting refrain, mourning the souls who could never return. Our sons went forth with swords held brave, their blood and bones in distant grave. Last year this self was yet intact. Last night this body spoke and laughed. Within the dreamscape, Gumong fell to his knees and curled into a ball. Hoarse, garbled cries issued from his throat. He was calling for his friends, his soldiers, the perseverance and passion he'd risked everything for. In the fog of remembrance, someone took his hand and stroked his hair, trying to console him in soft whispers. "Don't cry," they murmured. "Gumong, don't cry." He didn't know who this person was. He only felt that their hand was so warm and so strong. They held onto his hand like they were trying to drag him ashore out of that sea of dead souls. Gumong sobbed. He grabbed that hand, vaguely recognizing from the faint scent of their skin that this was someone safe to trust. He held it in a death grip, fastening his fingers around theirs with all his might. "They can't come back," he wailed. "None of them can come back." All because of his birth, his people, his soldiers would never get to hear. For when these heroes' souls come home, throughout the land shall peace be known. None of them could return. Why was I the only one left behind? Gumong wept desperately, clutching that hand as if grasping at straws, barely able to form words. Why do you have to push me so far? Why? Why? Amid the turmoil, that person tightly held his hand. So tightly, so forcefully, as if with this kind of strength, he could say the quiet words he could never again voice. "I'm still here. You still have me. I'll stay with you." Gumong remained in this unconscious stupor until the 5th day. Only then did he finally struggle free of that dream and into wakefulness. Lashes quivering, he slowly opened his eyes. They had long returned from the soul-calling abyss. The memorial ceremony was over. He lay on a spacious bed covered in a thick fox fur blanket. A thin cloud-patterned curtain the color of ink hung around him, and through it he could see the luxuriant light beyond the window and the crackling fire within the room. This was Shihe Manor. He had returned to Shihe Manor. Gumong pulled himself up and reached out to draw the curtains aside. He sat on the big bed, gathering himself for a while. He was drenched in sweat, the terror and grief of his dream still fresh. He stared blankly into the burning coals, mumbling the name he had remembered, Jianxing. Lu Jianxing. He remembered that Lu Jianxing was his brother, but he couldn't recall anything else. He didn't know where they had met or why Lu Jianxing had left. His brain was like a wrung-out cotton cloth, and he was unable to squeeze even the slightest bit more from it. There had also been those many silhouettes from the dream. His army. He used to have an army, didn't he? Gumong clutched his broken head as he sat on the verge of the bed. He had never before felt so bewildered and vexed. Yeah, 5 days is a long time to be unconscious. The door to the side room suddenly creaked open. Li Wei walked in with sweets and medicine. At the sight of Gumong sitting up with his head in his hands, staring into space, he exclaimed, "Ayah, you're awake." Gumong made a quiet noise of assent. "Since you're awake, take your medicine." Li Wei placed the wooden tray beside him. "Look, 2 bowls, one for fever, one to calm the heart." Gumong shot a weary glance at those 2 bowls of strong medicine, but his attention was drawn to a small celadon plate beside them. Upon this plate were 2 pale pink flour cakes, made of rose petals and glutinous rice flour. Their skin was translucent and soft, the sweet red bean filling faintly visible within. Li Wei saw the direction of his glance and laughed. The Lord ordered these prepared for you. You've been very weak these past few days. Every sip of medicine would make you throw up. But with the flour cakes to take away a little of the bitterness, at least you can still drink it. The Lord? Gumong blinked, pausing. Moshi? Li Wei's smile became a glare. Impudent. Is the Lord's name something you can use? Come now, he continued. Take your medicine. Gumong didn't have the energy to bicker with him. Besides, the lingering vestiges of that dream had left his mind a jumble. He obediently accepted the medicine. 1 bowl was unbearably bitter and the other was unbearably spicy. Holding his nose, Gumong gulped them both down. The instant he was done, he smacked his lips and shoved a flour cake into his mouth. It was especially soft, perhaps so he could swallow it even if unconscious. With only a few bites, it melted in his mouth like snow. That sounds so good. After eating 1 cake, Gumong looked up and licked his lips. What about him? Li Wei stared at him. Who? Is he not here? Only then did Li Wei realize Gumong was asking about Moshi. With helpless amusement and exasperation, he admonished, That's my lord, or Shihajun, to you. How many times have I taught you the rules? He paused, a little curious. Why are you asking after the lord? Is there something you need to discuss with him? Gumong nodded. I'm giving him the other flour cake. Li Wei stopped laughing. Of course the Lord wouldn't eat something like this. Why would you save it for him? Gumong thought it over. Ever since he remembered Moshi's coming of age, some indescribable emotion would flare and flutter in his heart whenever he thought of him. I live in his territory, so I should give it to him. Li Wei stroked his chin with interest and muttered, Strange, is this about wolf pack ranking? Is the beta wolf trying to win favor with the alpha? What alpha? He was interrupted by a deep, cold voice from behind him. Li Wei turned to see Moshi striding into the room in a full set of black military robes. Ah, nothing, he said guiltily. My lord is back from court. Why so early today? It's almost the new year. Things have been fairly quiet. Moshi glanced at Gumong, who was still sitting up on the bed. Without turning to look at Li Wei, he said, You may leave. I'll speak to him alone. The carved wooden door opened and closed as Li Wei left. Moshi walked to the side of the bed and pulled up a chair. You, Gumong hesitantly began. Moshi reached out to feel his forehead before he could finish. This man had touched him plenty of times before, grabbing his chin, pushing him against walls, so on and so forth. So what was a mere touch on the head? Yet somehow, that organ in his ribcage seemed to skip a beat. He suddenly felt a little nervous. Your fever's gone. Moshi hadn't noticed the slight oddness in Gumong's manner. He lowered his hand, his features cool and indifferent as ever. Tell me, then, what else have you remembered these past few days? Gumong wavered. I haven't... You'd best not lie to me, Moshi said. Only then did Gumong notice the dark smudges beneath Moshi's eyes, clearly the result of long nights spent without sleep. I've been at your side nearly the entire time. I already heard most of what you said in your sleep. Gumong fell silent. Moshi tilted his fair and elegant face waiting expressionlessly for Gumong's response. He thought for a moment. I don't know. It was just bits and pieces of things. Moshi didn't reply. He seemed to be suppressing some emotion, but whatever it was broke past his restraint and could no longer be held back. His eyes flicked up, that knife-like gaze piercing right into Gumong's chest, as if he wanted to flens him open, flesh to bone. As he fixed Gumong with a hunter's glare, Moshi ground his teeth and said, I heard you call his name. Gumong blinked. Moshi's next words seemed to have been crushed between his teeth, carrying an indescribable burden of dissatisfaction and hatred. And though Gumong couldn't be sure, he thought he sensed a twinge of jealousy. You can't forget him, after all, Moshi said stormily. You can't forget Lu Jianxing, can you? Oh, that's the end of the chapter. As soon as they started talking about alpha and beta wolves, I was like, oh, the fanfic writes itself. Okay, we're on chapter 61, which is called What Am I? Moshi spoke quietly, but his voice was full of oppressive storm clouds. Lu Jianxing, Gumong mumbled. Jianxing. This overly intimate mode of address swiftly ignited the fire in Moshi's heart. Brows knit in fury, he clenched his jaw. Sure enough, Gumong, in your heart, he's always going to be much more important than me. Gumong fumbled through his pitiful memories. He was my brother. This word seemed to jab Moshi. Yes, he was your brother. His voice was very low when he said this, as if he were enduring his disgust, striving to admit a truth that nauseated him. He took a deep breath and raised a hand to massage his temple. You're absolutely right, he continued softly. Lu Jianxing, that useless idiot, that stupid, over-emotional swine, he was your brother. These words bothered Gumong somewhere in the recesses of his consciousness. He frowned. You can't insult him. He's not a stupid swine. He's not useless either. Moshi was silent. The hand kneading at his aching head froze, but it remained by his brow, hiding the expression on his face. It took him a while to reply. Even with your mind broken, you still remember enough to defend him? Moshi didn't raise his voice or express any outward rage, but when Gumong heard his voice, he shuddered. General Gu, you're truly so considerate. You hold such deep sentiment for your comrades. Moshi lowered his hand and looked up. His gaze was dark and deep, glimmering distantly. In silence, he stared at Gumong for a long while, something shadowy and inscrutable in his face. So tell me then, what have you remembered about that dear brother of yours? Moshi's gaze was too heavy. Gumong bowed his head beneath his stare. Looking at his knees, he began to speak. First, I saw a lot of people. They were all blaming me. Moshi waited for him to elaborate. Blaming me for not doing what I promised them, saying that I forgot their names. Dazed, Gumong continued. And then I saw Jianxing. Moshi's heart tightened, but his expression remained neutral. And what did he do to you? He smiled at me. He looked back to smile at me, and then he turned to leave. I wanted to chase after him, but I couldn't catch up. He disappeared among the rest of them, said Gumong. That's how I remembered I used to have a brother like him. Moshi didn't make a sound. Gumong raised his head to ask, hesitantly, Was I like you before? Did I have an army too? A pause. Yes. Then, was Jianxing also in the army? Yes, Moshi replied expressionlessly. He was your second in command. Gumong's eyes sparked with longing. Where is he? Is he also in Chonghua? Moshi looked out the window. Magpies were chirping outside, and sunlight streamed onto the floor through the window lattice. You'll never see him again. No need to miss him. Gumong was taken aback. Why? Moshi's expression was cruel in its indifference as he uttered 3 succinct words. He's already dead. There were a few beats of silence before Gumong asked blankly, What? He's dead. He was decapitated in the Eastern Market. His body hung there for 3 days. How much hatred did it take to turn this upright and honorable man into such a malicious creature? Poison seemed to burst from his heart and drip from his teeth. Moshi didn't look at Gumong's face, his eyes fixed on the variegated patterns of light cast by the window lattice. My apologies. That person has long vanished from this world. It doesn't matter if you miss him. You're just wasting your time. Gumong's eyes widened. He had learned enough words these days to understand everything Moshi said. But at this moment, he suddenly wished he was still the way he'd been at Loamei Pavilion, only able to comprehend the simplest sentences. He didn't want to understand what Moshi was saying at all. Gumong's lips parted. He wanted to speak, but his heart felt like it was being cut apart. It wasn't a great shock, as if he'd already known subconsciously that Lu Jianxing was dead, as if he had already experienced such anguish and separation many years ago. But he hadn't expected that Moshi would unearth this bloody wound and so ruthlessly tear it apart. Gumong lowered his head and his vision blurred. Moshi whipped around, grinding his teeth. What are you crying for? I don't know. After so long, you still mourn for him. Blood surged in Moshi's chest. He still worked to restrain himself, but his eyes were becoming bloodshot. Gumong, you must be fucking insane. Gumong could only hold his head and mumble, You don't understand. You don't understand. What do I not understand? Hearing Gumong instinctively take Lu Jianxing's side, Moshi's chest constricted. His temper flared. With a crash, he swept the bowls on the bedside table to the floor, the shattered porcelain clinking across the ground. Moshi shot to his feet, grabbing Gumong's hairknot and wrenching his face upward so he could only look at Moshi. Do you know what kind of lowlife Lu Jianxing was? He snarled, gnashing his teeth. Do you know what kind of worthless person he was? Gumong couldn't reply. Yes, he was your brother. In Moshi's probing gaze was a desire to pull out all of Gumong's organs, to crush them between his palms so he could never mourn for another again. He felt so much hatred, so much longing. He was so completely at a loss. His hands almost trembling, Moshi snapped. It was your dear brother who impulsively beheaded that envoy on the battlefield. He was the one who instigated the calamity that set aflame the hatred of the other neutral countries. He was the one who brought doom upon Changhua and caused so many innocents to lose their lives. You can't remember any of this, can you? Good. I'll remind you. I'll tell you. Yours, mine. Our fellow soldiers were lured into a trap because of him. Millions of Chonghua's citizens' lives were ruined or cut short because of him. Your brother. You're the one who indulged him. Go on, keep defending him. The fury Moshi had suppressed for so many years ignited, flames of rage reaching out to burn through Gumong. Brother? For the sake of a moment's satisfaction, he disregarded your command and beheaded an envoy who'd come to parley. That's your brother? He pushed you into the fire and set you up to fail. That's your brother? Your lifelong wish to see slaves succeed and achieve things too. You worked so tirelessly, for so long, risking your life time and time again. With one impulse, he destroyed everything you strove for. So what kind of fucking brother is this? The tendons protruded from Moshi's hands as he spoke. His cheeks were flushed with emotion, the veins in his neck pulsing. He stared hard into Gumong's eyes, his gaze unblinking as he poured all his surging hatred and upset down upon him. Gumong, you'd better get this straight, he thundered furiously. If it weren't for that evil bastard, none of this would have fucking happened. The nobles wouldn't have been given cause to wag their tongues, and the emperor wouldn't have been given the chance to strip you of your power. All those innocent cultivators, commoners, none of them would have fucking died. Nor would you have... Moshi panted, suddenly unable to continue. He slowly released Gumong, his eyes filled with fiery hatred and endless tears. He turned away and swiped at the rims of his eyes. The bitterness in his throat had suppressed for the rest of that sentence. The past few years had hurt too much to endure. It really was too much. If it weren't for Liu Jianxing, you wouldn't have been pushed to the point of no return. You wouldn't have defected to the Liao Kingdom and given yourself up to demonic magic. We would not have ended up like this. It's come to this, and yet you still can't forget him. You still treat him as your brother. Mo Shi's face wore a veneer of ridicule that shoved down all his sorrow. And still you don't let me curse his name, I mixed up murmured and mumbled. It is murmured. And still you don't let me curse his name, he murmured. Mo Shi lowered his lashes and softly scoffed. Fine, I understand. Whether in the past, present, or future, no matter when, no matter if he did right or wrong, no matter if he's alive or dead, I still lose to him. His trembling lips pressed themselves together. Mo Shi fell silent. He was such a proud person. He had torn his chest open, given Gumong everything he had, but still he had been cast aside. He had so pathetically become a sacrificial pawn in Gumong's life. How could he once more summon up the courage to tell Gumong how he felt? Mo Shi tamped down his unsteady emotions, afraid that he would lose more and more control if he continued. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Only after a long while did he utter one sentence, his voice low and hoarse, almost a sigh. Gumong, if he's your brother, then what am I? Oh, that's the chapter title. What am I? Who am I to you? Once, you abandoned me for your brothers, discarded me for your ideals, pushed me into the depths of hell for your comrades. It's been 7 years. I've lingered in this hell, living a life worse than death for 7 years. When you staked everything for them, did you ever think of me? Did you want me to face the person I loved the most with swords drawn? Or did you want me to run off with you into the distance, tossing aside the Chonghua that the Mo clan has protected for generations? When you left in fury on their behalf, did you ever think about where that left me? I cared for you and cherished you, so you didn't hesitate to hurt me over and over, to regard me as the least of your worries again and again, right? Mo Shi's expression was shattered, despite his valiant attempts to control it. As Gumong stared, he couldn't describe how he felt. He only knew that it hurt very much. It hurt to hear that Liu Jianxing was dead. It hurt to hear the soldiers in his dream call him General Gu. But seeing Mo Shi like this caused him an entirely different kind of anguish. It made him reach out, almost unwittingly. After some hesitation, he cupped Mo Shi's face with one trembling hand. No, you're my what? The answer seemed to be on the tip of his tongue, but he couldn't give voice to it. Those intimate memories of their past seemed to be right there in his heart, but he couldn't unearth them, no matter how much he tried. Mo Shi tilted his head, waiting for Gumong to finish his sentence. But after they gazed at each other for a long while, Gumong still had a lump in his throat and said nothing. As he waited, Moshi's eyes slowly reddened and filled with tears. He pushed Gumong's hand away. You don't need to think so hard. I'll say it for you. To you, I am nothing. Between us, we had nothing. You were just playing along, and I was young and foolish. He spat out each word, one by one, his red eyes fixed on Gumong's face. His tone and expression were ruthless and fierce, but each word stabbed into his very own heart. Your brother was Lu Jianxing, not me. Your dream was accomplishing your goals, not me. Your passion, your obsession, the past you can't relinquish, was your thousands of comrades, not me. Gumong shook his head slightly. As he watched this terribly powerful, yet terribly lonely man, the pain in his heart grew deeper and clearer. That's not right. It's not like this. Moshi's hand clamped around his wrist, the light in his eyes wavering as he stared at Gumong's face. What else could it be? He yanked on Gumong's hand with terrifying force, pulling it to his chest where his heart throbbed. Did you know? I have a scar here. You gave it to me. Gumong's eyes widened slightly. Moshi laughed softly, almost masochistically. Gumong, I've always wanted to ask you this question. If the person who tried to stop you back then was Lu Jianxing instead of me, would you have been able to bring the blade down? I hurt you before? Moshi leaned in close and whispered right into his ear. You nearly killed me. Just because, back then, I loved you more than I feared death. As though burned, Gumong wanted to jerk his hand away, but Moshi pressed down on it so hard he couldn't move. He could only feel the pulsing throb of the heartbeat under his hand. How could he have wanted to kill him? In his memories, he saw that they had been inseparably close. So how could he have just been playing along? There were many things he couldn't fully remember, but he could clearly recall the happiness and warmth he felt on that night Moshi came of age. How could it be false? Very confusing, isn't it? Moshi spoke into his ear, his breath very close, damp and heated. As a matter of fact, I can't understand it either. 7 years ago, you pushed me into hell. I've thought it over for a full 7 years, but even today, I still don't understand how you could be so ruthless. His voice was so low, but it coursed with an incandescent hatred. I don't understand you, Gumong. Did you think I'd always forgive you without reservation? Is that why you trampled over me? Or was it because... He paused, the jut of his throat bobbing. I was never in your heart to begin with. That's why you could take my heart and tread on it like dirt. That's why you didn't care that I was besieged from all sides, forced to make impossible choices, unable to answer to both gratitude and loyalty. Gumong was forced to a dead end by these blood-tainted questions. He felt that his pitiful brain was at its limit. He had only a ladleful of memories, but Moshi wanted to scoop a sea of emotions out of him. I don't know, he mumbled. I really, really don't know. You do know. It's buried in your heart, Moshi said quietly. I'm keeping you just to wait for the day you do remember. Then I will make you kneel before me and give me an answer, an apology. Only then did those slender and cold fingers release their grip on Gumong's hairknot and move to pat Gumong threateningly on the back. My patience isn't actually much better than Murong Lian's. Moshi slowly pulled away from Gumong, those sleepless eyes fixed on his face. So, he whispered, tapping Gumong's temple, Shiga, don't make me wait too long. Okay, well, I would also like to go back to the wolf shenanigans. Once again, everything hurts. Let me see, how many chapters do we have left? Like 60... I think we might be at a good stopping point for today. Well, okay, this is a short chapter, actually. I don't know. No, I think we'll stop for today, and then I think we would be able to finish the book next stream. I just hate to stop here, and also I'm very curious because when we return, we're going to be reading chapter 62, which is called Princess Mengzi. And I have all the questions about Princess Mengzi. So, I guess that's what we're going to do on Wednesday. We're going to find out what her deal is. Okay, 5 chapters left, 54 pages. Okay, that's perfect. We will... Okay, so next stream, we're going to finish volume 2. The next part is best read in one go. Okay, good to know. It only took us almost 2 entire books to meet her. Exactly, War Dove. I keep thinking, for all that everyone keeps saying that, like, Moshi is gonna marry Princess Mengzi, I'm like, she doesn't seem very important to him. I have no idea about her except that she's, like, sick or something. So, yeah, that was a roller coaster once again. Thank you to Meat Bun. Yep, everyone is shipping her with Moshi. That's what it is. It's just a ship. Completely not canon. So I will see y'all on Monday. Oh my god, I truly cannot talk today. I think I was looking at the name Moshi. I will see y'all on Wednesday. This is where I'm at today. I'll see you on Wednesday for the next stream, and we're going to finish this book. I'm super excited to find out what's going to happen. Yes. Moshi Day. Monday. That's the new day of the week. That's whatever day of the week it is that we're doing a reading stream is Monday now. So I'll see y'all soon. Have a good one.